I'm not kidding you, look at this! This is the Ganondorf fight. It's not even a spin on it, it's literally exactly the Ganondorf fight, which is probably the most interesting thing in this game. Hey, Jarek here, and Games Workshop confuses me. They were incredibly stingy about who gets to make Warhammer 40k games. The result was that vast majority of them for decades were strategy games, which fits, but I'm not really interested in that. The few shooters we got were mediocre at best. We did get the awesome Space Marine, but we all assumed we would never see a conclusion to that, after the awful cliffhanger. Fast forward about a decade from then, and we suddenly have tons to choose from. Necromunda is a mediocre game, but they're trying something with it. Dark Tide is a nice Left 4 Dead style game, if that's your thing. Boltgun is exactly what I've wanted from 40k forever. A boomer shooter with Space Marines, it just works. And we're even getting a sequel to Space Marine. It looks awesome, I cannot wait for this game. But there's one game that's been so overlooked, it doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. That's Warhammer 40k Battle Sister. We went from having no 40k shooters to having a VR shooter named Battle Sister. Now, if you're not into VR, don't worry. I'm not making this video with the intent of saying, hey, here's an awesome game you should play. I know most of my viewers don't have VR headsets. And also, this game isn't very good, I have a lot of complaints, and this video is going to be entertaining. But more importantly, Games Workshop giving the green light to a VR 40k game. And if you know gamers, they can be kinda dumb. You're all watching me because you play video games and you probably agree with that statement. A game with the title of Battle Sister doesn't appeal to people not into 40k that understand what it is. Let's just say there's a reason the cover of Bioshock Infinite looks like this instead of the much cooler alternative design. Gamers are predictable in what they're gonna grab off the shelves, or click on Steam in this regard. With that said, for those of you not into 40k, think of Battle Sisters as effectively the female variant of the Space Marines, but without the massive tank armor. I know that is majorly oversimplifying. 40k's lore goes so deep you can make a religion about it. People probably already have. But if you're about to go to the comments and write a huge essay about how no, you're actually wrong, I can't stress enough how much I don't care. I'm just here to shoot a bolter because I think it's fun. Okay, so what is 40k Battle Sister? Who are you? What's going on? Well, it's 40k, so there's a war happening, of course there is. You of course play as a Battle Sister, who is under attack by the Chaos faction. Battle Sisters are raised from birth to be warriors. You just so happen to be a twin, but your sister was killed 10 years ago. Or so you thought. Very early on, an Inquisitor tells you that your sister may still be alive. The story twists into a combination of trying to quell the Chaos faction and trying to find your sister. I will not spoil the events that take place, but what I will say is that the characters do have good voice acting and they are written well.
The Emperor's light burns all heretics and mutants. You are far from the cloister, sister.
I am Ophelia, and my sister Rosalina is close by. You were in the cathedral before it fell, Astartes?
Yes, I'm Brother Julius of the Black Templars. My squad and I were preparing for a mission to this dead planet. The attack has changed the parameters of that somewhat.
This sounds and feels like a 40k game, which is a very good thing. First impressions didn't blow me away, but this is still a VR game. And that comes with a huge sense of scale that cannot be described from a flat screen. But I'll do my best. Take for example, I am 10 feet tall. The average person is going to stand about this tall to me. So if you're talking to me, you're going to have to look up like this. In a regular video game, that's just hold the mouse, raise it up a bit. In VR, you are truly looking up. There is a true sense of scale. It feels and looks very real. So when you're standing in front of a Space Marine, you have to look up at that Space Marine. That's kind of awesome. Just trust me when I say this is something that really doesn't translate to a flat screen game. It's why I tell people to not bother playing the Half-Life Alyx mod that just makes it a regular game. It's not the same and it's nowhere near as good. The game was made for VR. Truly, a flat screen version of Alyx has limited weapons and is pretty simple. Genuinely, my advice is, if you can't play it in VR, just don't play it. It's not worth it. If you can play it in VR, it's very worth it. But I'm getting off topic. My point here is that it's really cool to be able to walk around and look at these grand cathedrals. This is VR, and you are in that world. Unfortunately, this is where almost all of my positives end. As soon as I booted up the game, I could tell that it was not made for the Index. This caused a plethora of annoying things to happen. 1. Index controllers do not have a grip button on the back of them. They just have a sensor that senses where your fingers are. So you have individual finger control. Obviously not all game needs this, you don't have to implement it, but the game was made for a grip button in mind, which caused stupid nonsense. Naturally, when I'm just standing here, my hands rest at my side, and if I close my hands at all, they grab something, and I have holsters on my side. The amount of times I accidentally grabbed a gun and then dropped it and didn't realize I lost it, it was beyond frustrating. And then comes climbing ladders, where if you had a grip button, it would be fairly easy because that's what it was made for. But the game just did not recognize that I was trying to grab the ladder, even though my hand is closing. It's little stuff like this that just gets really irritating. But oh boy, there's a lot of little stuff like this in this game. The one positive I can say with performance is that thankfully I didn't have any frame rate issues. But that's partially because graphically it's not that advanced. And in some places it's just downright buggy. Alright mech, why are you floating above the ground? Also, why do I get stuck on everything? Any little piece of rubble, any little crease in the ground, you're going to get stuck on. And this game doesn't have a jump button, just a boost button. I genuinely got excited when I first launched this game. I looked down and I saw that I had a full body. That means games are usually going to operate under Boneworks principles, not floating hand principles. But that isn't the case here. See, in games like Boneworks and Lawn, they take the Half-Life 2 approach, where there's physics to everything. Your body interacts with the world around you. You can climb everything. Melee has weight to it. That weight determines how much damage you're going to do. You know what? Come here. Come here. Yeah, none of this is a thing in this game, so seeing your full body just awkwardly walk around is more immersion breaking than anything else. Now, I prefer the Boneworks method, where you have a full body, where you can interact with everything, where everything has physics. That's really satisfying to me. But I know some people don't prefer that. They would prefer the Half-Life Alyx way, where you're just a floating pair of hands. But that doesn't really matter here, because there's a big emphasis on melee combat, so you kind of need to take the Boneworks approach. Unfortunately, they've failed horribly. You have two main melee weapons you're going to be using throughout the game: your sword and your chainsword. These two work vaguely similar but different. The sword is your standard sword. You will have to swing to do damage to people. The chainsword is a chainsword. You could literally just turn it on and walk to people and they'll die. Both of these are extremely underwhelming. It feels like these weapons have no weight. It is not physics-based at all. When you hit someone in the head, their head just pops like a cherry. It's not satisfying, there's no huge swinging, slicing sound or anything like that. It's lacking the little details to actually make this rewarding. And the chainsword is extremely disappointing. Come on, it's a chainsword. How do you mess this up? How is that not satisfying? At least make it like Gears of War, where there's tons of jibs and gore everywhere. It's 40k, it's supposed to be brutal. Oh, but it gets so much worse than that. One of the things you can do is hold up your melee weapon to block incoming fire. This sounds awesome, because it kind of is. However, it's very janky, and basically requires you to do this. This isn't an optional cool thing you can do, this is the optimal thing you need to do. It's also difficult to figure out where they're shooting at you. I found that it's generally more near your chin or chest rather than your actual face, which is unintuitive. Also, if you can block things with your sword and then you don't give people enough ammo for your guns, at least make the enemies have to reload.
The galaxy will burn!
Anyway, whenever you're trying to shoot over or under your sword, it makes it bug out. Whenever your sword gets hit while you're doing this, it also bugs out. Oh, and my favorite, occasionally your arm just gets stuck in walls for no reason. Dying like this is incredibly frustrating. But then there's really weird interactions in general. Enemy bodies don't seem to have any sort of collision with the melee. Your sword just kind of slices through them without making a noise, and then their head pops or their arm falls off. It does not feel like you're actually swinging a sword at them. But there is one thing that does have collision on them. Their gun, which just gets in the way. They're not actively blocking you. It's not like there's an animation here. No, it's just like there's a wall in front of them. Needless to say, melee is not satisfying. They did not do the chainsword justice. Alright, okay, so melee sucks, but how are the guns? Just as underwhelming. This is your bolter. How? How does this not sound more satisfying? You have self-propelled projectiles that are supposed to make people pop. This is what they feel like? The same can be said for every weapon in the game. All underwhelming. The melt-a-gun, while being as powerful as it should be, almost has no effects at all. You shoot at someone, there's this big orange flash, and then they fall over, and then their body disappears. This gun, that I'm forgetting the name of, is probably the strongest weapon in the game, able to kill Space Marines in 2 shots. But it certainly doesn't feel like it should be strong. It feels like your starting pistol that should be worthless. And if you let it overheat, it will explode, so I guess you have an extra explosive with it. This causes really amusing effects when it blows up, especially in the air. The flamethrower is probably the most satisfying weapon in the game. It has a surprising amount of range, but even then the effects are really simple and underwhelming. Yeah, so you messed up the most important thing of a 40k first-person shooter. Satisfying weapons that are over the top. That's what 40k is, over the top. It's supposed to be brutal, it's supposed to be grotesque, that's the point. This is no Space Marine as far as combat is concerned. Shit, the bolter in Bolt Gun is more satisfying, and those are literal pixels popping.
This is the Emperor's will.
This game is entirely lacking the small things that I've come to appreciate in 40k games. The attention to detail, the loud stomping noises of Space Marines giving them power, the little effects around the projectiles of the bolt guns themselves. That extra bit of polish is gone here. It doesn't exist. And that is a big deal when it comes to something like the 40k universe. As for the gameplay itself, it gets repetitive, fast. It feels like an early 2000s hallway shooter. You walk down a boring looking hallway, enemies pour out of you, they're mindless and run straight at you, or sit back with a gun. You kill them, you move on, do the same thing over and over and over again. You'd think Chaos Marines would add something to that variety, but no, it's more or less the same thing. They're just a tankier version of the same enemies. Even the enemies that should be more interesting, like daemons, aren't. They run straight at you, you can hold your sword out, they get parried automatically, you don't need any timing, then you kill them. That's it, those are the enemies. Then there's this abomination, which should make things more interesting, but it also doesn't. It's just a melee tank that you can kill pretty easily. I don't think any of them ever did any damage to me. So yeah, gameplay-wise, while technically not being the worst thing I've ever played, it's just really boring. Look, I have wings. I like being in high places. Don't judge me. The one time this game tries to separate itself, it basically gives you Jedi powers. By holding a button and doing hand gestures, you can activate certain powers. The first one you get is slow-mo, which actually isn't very useful. Enemy projectiles seem to go roughly at the same speed, so it just doesn't really matter much. You do get what is effectively force push, which is, I guess, useful against the weakest enemies in the game. I didn't really use this that much. Almost all the powers won't mean anything once you get the shield power, which is very good. This is your get out of jail free card, or get up close to a big enemy so you can use your melta on them. But these abilities do fit in more with Jedi Knight than they do 40k. And I have a problem with how you activate them. Well, how you activate them works, I have a problem with knowing when you can activate them. See, if you look at the bracelet on your arm, it will tell you if it's charged or not. You charge your powers by killing more enemies. The problem is, in the midst of combat, it's really hard to pay attention to that. So, you have enemies all around you, you try to use your powers, you don't have enough charge, and then you die. But I reiterate, This is the only thing to separate this game from every other generic shooter ever. It's not enough. Even the bosses are boring and uninspired. There's 3 in total, and the first 2 boil down to shoot the weak point until it dies. Shoot the scorpion's turret, it falls over, shoot it in the face, it'll eventually die. Do this a certain amount of times and it's gone forever. If you die at all during this process, do it all over again. Okay, my legs are falling asleep, I gotta get down from here. Now the second boss should be more interesting. You're fighting a giant mech. But no, again, shoot the weak points until someone else comes along and kills it for you. You never get to pilot these things, by the way, which would have been very cool. The third boss, they try something different by turning it into Ganondorf. I'm not kidding you, look at this. This is the Ganondorf fight. It's not even a spin on it. It's literally exactly the Ganondorf fight, which is probably the most interesting thing in this game. Yeah, so maybe there's a reason nobody's heard of 40k Battle Sister, and it's not just because it's on VR. That definitely hampers it a little bit because the VR platform is inherently smaller than full-size games, yada yada. It's not going to be just a gimmicky thing. But this game would certainly make you feel like VR is just gimmicky. In a world where we have full VR games like Boneworks and Alex and Vertigo 1 and 2, 40k Battle Sister just doesn't cut it. And it's also only 3 to 4 hours long. That's it. It's not worth the price they're asking for, and in general, it's just disappointing. Now, I know I've been ragging on this game the whole time, but I can't give it less than, say, a 5. I'd probably give it a 5.5 out of 10. It's just more disappointing than it is truly bad. It doesn't give me any reason to continue playing it, I did beat it for the record, but it doesn't give me a reason to have loathing hatred for it either. It does have a co-op horde mode, which I forgot to mention, because you might forget it even exists. It's one platform, enemies continuously spawn at you, and that's the whole horde mode. With the combat being as boring as it is, it hardly gives you a reason to keep playing either. So yeah, this is going to be a one and done that you regret buying. But that should sum up Warhammer 40k Battle Sister. Thanks to my YouTube members, they get to see my videos at least 1 week ahead of time, usually quite a bit longer. Huge thanks to everyone that followed me over on Twitch. I stream pretty often, and I genuinely enjoy hanging out and just playing games over there, before I have to go into the editing grind. Big thanks to everyone that subscribed. If you're still here, you probably like my content, so be sure to subscribe, and check out all this other stuff around the rest of the video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.